Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. We're really excited to be here at the World Football Summit. I'm here with our panellists, Dr. Ronnie Banerjee, CEO and founder of AB3 Medical, Joshua Manuel, who is an English professional footballer, and Alistair McHenry, who is a sports lawyer at TIA. And we're going to start by introducing you with a just short video of AB3 Medical.
AB3 empowers the athlete,
merges the records,
and revolutionises the care in sport.
It's an integrated athlete passport app, so it's there to help manage injuries and illness better and have huge kind of implications financially and time-wise for all the stakeholders involved in someone's care. They can show any clinician all the right medical information straight away, whatever the club, wherever the country, wherever the healthcare sector.
We've got to make sure that our players are best looked after, because ultimately they're the biggest commodity, they're the product that we're selling.
A championship outfit, you'd expect that they would have known the full history themselves at early stages of bowel cancer. All this could have been prevented if we'd have known the information sooner.
It doesn't look after the player, it leaves the clinician and the medical team at significant risk, because what you don't know you can't help.
It's like buying a really bad second-hand car, you just won't do it, so that service history is really important to have.
If I arrive in A&E today and I'm unconscious for whatever reason, they have no idea whatsoever of what injuries I've occurred, what tests I've had.
Even simple things like knowing what drug allergies that player might have, they might not have access to, which is quite scary.
Their healthcare record isn't passed on to the general practitioners.
it's a passport to get the best care.
Well, that A&E consultant who sees the player who's got a broken leg can input directly onto the app, and that can be available on the dashboard for me straight away. And that's something that's unique.
So there are a whole host of different tools on there that allows players to have some control.
What I really like about AB3 is it just flips the model on its head.
I think it's really warming to know that he won't have the same issues and problems that many current past players, athletes, sports people around the world face daily, because they don't have all the information, and I think information is king.
So that's just a quick summary of AB3 Medical, and AB3 Medical came from a
16 and had my...
There we go. So AB3 Medical started because of a professional footballer called Angus MacDonald, and his medical notes were not passed on from club to club, which was very detrimental for him. And we're just going to show a quick summary of his case in his own words.
16 and had my first blood clot on my lung. Reading were fully aware of the treatment I was having, the investigations that were going on. Moving to Barnsley, a championship outfit, you'd expect that they would have known the full history themselves. I was always short of breath. They then started to pick up on it that maybe we should send him for some tests. And then obviously caught wind, I think it was in the January, that Hull were interested. So I leaped at the opportunity, and then unfortunately picked up a second clot in my right leg. We were having tests from head to toe, all over the country at NHS, private practices, blood tests, scans, colonoscopies, cameras down my throat, realising that I had clots just sitting around in my lung. It's crazy to think that that being left there so long could have caused something a bit more fatal. I had colitis and it had been untreated for so many years. Unfortunately, had biopsies took that then later down the line showed that I had.
So Ronnie, it would be good just to hear your thoughts about Angus's case, just in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so I'm Hull City's doctor. So I joined in September 2018. Angus joined on transfer deadline day in January. So it was a very tight kind of time line of getting his medical done. So having said that, it was very comprehensive. So they've done MRIs, they've done blood tests, they've done heart scans, they've done all of that, and then they were waiting for those results to come back. The medical information which was passed over from the previous club, Barnsley, some information got sent. However, later became apparent that other medical information didn't get passed on from other systems, so their GP system, so NHS. So when I joined in September, unfortunately, in the first week, Angus developed a blood clot in his leg, which is very, very alarming in a 26-year-old player. So for that to happen, put me on high alert and made me think I need to start investigating him from head to toe and see what the cause is here. So that then led to a full kind of thorough look at head-to-toe investigations of scans, of camera tests, and found out that Angus had undiagnosed, untreated colitis for several years. That put his body into a pro-inflammatory state. That then resulted in him shooting off these blood clots, which could have been fatal at any point. Luckily, as we were piecing together that kind of history, I joined him at my GP practice, and when I joined him there, I could see other investigations which Angus had done, blood tests and other things. And then we could piece that together a little bit better. He ended up having his colitis treated, ended up having surgery. Unfortunately, he then developed, as we saw from the video, bowel cancer. But luckily, under our care, he's ended up coming back. He's playing professional elite football now, and he's flying. That then led to the landmark £1 million legal case between Hull and Barnsley for non-medical disclosure of information. So that was a landmark case, and Angus always encourages us to use this case to try and help people who aren't as fortunate as him. Because what happened to him could have been avoidable if we had that information sooner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And all the information is in one place with AB3 Medical, isn't it? So could you just talk us through the next slide, just in more detail?
Yeah, so as a sports doctor, we end up having information from all the vast array of tests which we have done on people like Angus or Josh. So we'll end up doing screening tests, so blood tests, MRI scans, cardiac tests, concussion tests. Physios will be doing all sorts of performance tests. There's performance data which is there. So that's the stuff which we see. However, as we'll explain later on, there's multiple other places where specialists are doing tests. So whether that's radiology scans or orthopedics or heart scans, like we've said, that's the kind of specialist angle. And then when you add on to that other healthcare sectors, so you have GPs, you have care which is done there when players like Josh were a child, so vaccination history, childhood ailments which they would have had, when they go to emergency care, A&E, when they go abroad, when they retire, all of that information is somewhere else. So you can see we collect lots of information, but there's so much other information out there which is fragmented.
Yeah. And can you go into a little bit more detail about the financial impact that it has on clubs? Obviously, if that information is not passed across, there can be a lot that can happen financially to a club. There can be litigation and things like that. Could you just go into a bit more detail about this slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just highlighted a few studies over here. So the top one states that from 2013, over 5 seasons in the English Premier League, each club loses approximately 45 million due to injury-related decreases in performance per season, which is a staggering amount. And that's kind of secondary to calculated from injured player salaries, but underachievement of not having that player availability. The second one, Polici et al., basically reviews lots of very strong research which shows that the main injuries are ligament and muscle injuries in a footballer. And ligament and muscle injuries, quite a lot of them, once you actually have the backstory, if someone has recurrent muscle injuries, then if you knew what the previous MRI showed, if you knew what the previous test showed and previous assessments of other clinicians, then actually that would really impact how you would treat that player. And then the last one there is just about kind of Howden's our insurance broker, and they've basically said for the first time ever it's hit past the 500 million mark, which top European clubs are spending as a result of injuries on players, which again is a staggering amount.
And Alistair, I'm just going to move on to you now. Obviously, there's a lot of contentious issues on the screen, like dementia and heart problems, long-term injuries. Can you just go into a bit more detail about the research that Bonnie has just discussed and kind of what we can do to reduce these problems?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Yeah, I mean, those are on the screen some fairly high-profile examples of either medical negligence or action being taken against individuals or governing bodies. What's interesting in sports litigation, I've been a sports litigation lawyer for 15 years, a lot of cases never reach the press, a lot of cases are never published. That's because they're arbitrations rather than in court, which in the English courts anyway, which are a matter of public record. The interesting thing about the McDonald case was that the panel, very esteemed panel of very experienced arbitrators, they made the decision to publish the written reasons in the McDonald case, and they did that for policy grounds, really, because the importance of the medical disclosure warranties and the fact that Barnsley had not disclosed adequately had ramifications for all the other clubs. So it was imperative that those were published. And on reading them, it's a fascinating case. But on reading those written reasons, it just struck me that we had 3 medically qualified practitioners on each side giving witness evidence, plus an expert on each side as well. So you've got 8 medical witnesses in total. Now that, to me, as a lawyer, is crazy. We don't want medically qualified people spending their time in court because it's not what they should be doing. It's not what they trained for. It's not, we want them to be caring for athletes like Josh, and not having to spend time in court preparing. It's not an easy thing to do, to spend time in court, to be potentially cross-examined by an aggressive barrister. So what this app does is would take all that away, or it would take a large chunk of it away, so it would effectively streamline it, and you wouldn't have the need to cross-examine so many medically qualified witnesses.
Yeah, no, exactly. And all of this can be very easily avoided if the information just in one place and it can be transferred from club to club. It's a very simple solution, and that's kind of what AB3 hopes to achieve. We're going to just move on to the frontline research. So this is the research that Ronnie conducted himself after going through the Angus MacDonald case. And the athletes are just going to kind of go into a little bit of detail about what AB3 can do and how it can tackle these problems.
The AB3 app is perfect in my eyes. With all the things with AB3 being in one platform, I think it benefits everybody. It's quicker diagnosis for the player and for the clubs, which obviously is saving time, effort and money.
There are so many things that are talked about surrounding sport now, out in the public domain: dementia, concussion, heart issues, mental health problems. And I think to empower players and past players to have some control over this and be able to manage themselves, but also...
So Ronnie, it'd be great to hear your thoughts on kind of the extensive research that you've done.
Yeah, so the case which I was involved with Angus really opened my eyes of how there is fragmented data. So rather than just myself saying that, I wanted to see if that was the case across all of our colleagues. So from the top, so from Premier League down to League 2, so professional elite football, and 77 doctors, sports doctors participated in it, and there was 30 doctors across rugby as well who participated. And again, it was quite kind of astounding and alarming what the stats were. 49% of doctors don't pass on information when a player leaves their care and exits to move on to a different club. So people like Josh, who've moved from 5-6 different clubs, if half of those doctors aren't passing it on, we're missing potentially vital information. 50% of us don't know if players are registered with a GP or not, or don't ask that question, which again is alarming, because if we don't know if they're registered with a GP, then how can we pass it on to that care? There are 10 plus different note-keeping systems in use in football. So in certain sports, in rugby, in cricket, you've got every single club on the same system, so it's standardized. However, having 10 plus different systems is crazy, because it's only as good as the next team being on it, or people like myself passing on that information. And if half of us aren't passing it on, again, we're missing vital information.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Josh, you've kind of experienced this firsthand, I guess. And I understand that back in November 2021, you had a few medical issues.
Really like about it.
And I'm sure kind of since then, you don't really think about where your medical information is stored, but since then, and you've had to deal with that, you kind of do think a lot more about where everything is kept and that it's all in one place. Can you kind of elaborate on the issues that you had while training and what would have been different if you had AB3 Medical there?
Yeah, so firstly, hola everyone, good afternoon. And before my medical case, I didn't consider where my medical information was kept at all. I think as a player, you just get on with it, but after what happened on, like you said, in November 2021, just to rerun that day again, just woke up like normal, went into training, had my breakfast, had my porridge, went out to train, and during the warm-up I just felt very lightheaded, and initially I just thought, okay, this warm-up is a bit intense for me, let me just keep it moving and just continued as normal. And then I knew there might be a problem when we went into a passing drill and I couldn't get my words out properly. And so I stepped back to then, next thing I knew I was on the floor, and thankfully one of my teammates caught me. And when I went to hospital, thankfully everything was smoothed out, and they did say that I had a blood clot that traveled to my brain and stopped oxygen getting to my brain. And thereafter, the care that I got then and the care I got after, for it to just be in one place moving forward really allows me to share with potential clubs and potential managers, what actually happened, and they can see the excellent care that I had from Dr. Ronnie here, and also the whole City medical staff, who I can't thank enough. So, yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, and we kind of hope that AB3 Medical can solve this for future players, so they wouldn't have to go through what you went through again. And we're just going to look at a very short video of elite sports doctors looking at how AB3 Medical can be the solution for players like Josh.
What I really like about AB3 is it just flips the model on its head. Normally, a club or organisation has a medical electronic record system that they then dictate what happens. So it really empowers the player, which I think is revolutionary. It's done by a healthcare professional for healthcare professionals, so someone who knows what we want to know.
I think it's a given that this is an app that all sportsmen need. It brings the player's medical record together. It enables all practitioners to be able to look at every detail.
Now, Ronnie, could you just elaborate a little bit more on this slide? So could you just explain why EMR systems should have an A to E approach?
Yeah, so after the cases which we've discussed and the research which I conducted, I thought there's got to be a solution there. And my kind of dream would be that every single academy footballer gets put on a system which, instead of it being organisation-owned, a player has full access to that. A player can then take that with them wherever they go. So if they are moving from club to club, they are holding that and they have access to that 24/7. While they're under my care, I put the information on there. When they move to the new club, I get taken off it and a new doctor gets put on it. So moving on from the A to E approach is what we kind of created. And A, you want to standardize it, like we said earlier. Some sports already do that. And you want to have every single club on a system where when he moves, or people like Josh moves from club to club, it's already there. So that's the first thing. You want a solution to be interoperable. So we've mentioned when someone like Josh's case, where he's collapsed and he's gone to hospital, that's in an emergency setting. It's in a different setting where they know nothing about Josh's history. So, which is, again, it's alarming that he will have multiple blood tests, screens, and all sorts of things, which if they had that information, they can quickly try and solve that and move on to ways to actually help him. Then you want it, as I've just mentioned, to be 24/7 accessible to that player and for them to be able to carry that wherever they go. If they are on international duty, if they are in another healthcare sector, like we've said, if they then move to a different country or club where there is different healthcare, they have immediate kind of access to that. You want a template where, as we've said, cases like Angus's, it was done on transfer deadline day, one of multiple other signings on that day. So yes, he had different scans and bloods and things done, but he did not have, or the medical staff did not have access to that immediately. It takes time to get those results back. So if you had a place where you had all of Angus's information in front of you straight away, it's obviously beneficial. Yeah. And then when an athlete leaves the care, we've already established that there is poor transfer of information or handover of care between medical professionals. So there's an easy transition into retirement, which we'll go on to later.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you, Ronnie. And in a nutshell, Alistair, who owns this data ultimately?
So it's owned by the player or the athlete. That is their personal data, and you know, they're one of the problems in the McDonald case was that Barnsley had warranted that they would procure the consent of the player, that they would do everything they could to procure the consent of the player to give over his medical data. What they did wrong was they misjudged what data they actually had, and it was an incomplete transfer. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the legislation on data, I mean, there was a document published by FIFPro in 2022, which is the Charter of Player Data Rights, I believe it's called, but it's essentially it's built on all the leading and latest legislation, data protection legislation, which allows players or empowers players to both have access and to be able to access to their own medical data, and then to be able to transfer it with them. So the key two of the key 8, I think it is, principles in that document are in fact accessibility and portability, which both of which this app features of this app. So it complies with that legislation.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. So we're going to just move on to the main topics that we'd like to discuss, and the first one being daily care. This next video just goes into a little bit of detail of the problems that both footballers and elite medical professionals would deal with in their day-to-day life.
Keeping in football varies throughout all the clubs. 49% of clinicians don't generally pass on information, and in my experience that's well proven.
In my experience I've had issues transferring data between, even lost medical records in some instances.
It doesn't look after the player, it leaves the clinician and the medical team at significant risk, because what you don't know you can't help.
Being able just to act.
So, what you don't know, you can't help. Yeah, what you don't know, you can't help. And in short, kind of a lot of doctors aren't given the right information. It's not passed from club to club. So like Ronnie, for example, he isn't able to give the player the correct care without having all of the medical notes in one place. Ronnie, could you just go into a little bit of detail about the day-to-day care problems that you would have as a doctor?
Yeah, so what if you've ended up having, as we've mentioned before, vaccination history, or someone has a chronic disease like asthma or epilepsy or diabetes, that care is done in a different environment. And if then players like Josh come and ask me about those things, I haven't got that information to hand. Time's then lost, money's then spent, resources are then wasted on trying to claw back that data so I can provide good care to try and get Josh, which inevitably players like Josh back on the pitch, because that's what it's about. It's player availability and improving player health and welfare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Josh, can you just tell me, like, briefly what kind of medical things you would have done, like screenings and blood tests and things like that, when you were at football clubs?
Yeah, so all of that kind of stuff, usually done in pre-season. But again, you just do it like you're told to do it, but you don't really think where the information's going. So yeah, I guess this really helps put the onus on you to be able to present this information to anyone who asks. So yeah, it's really handy.
Yeah, and have you ever thought about kind of where the information is all kept? Before, you had this problem, have you ever sat down and thought, it's not all in one place?
Yeah, exactly. And especially where you're just concentrating on football, you don't really want to be delving into different websites to try and find your medical information, different links. But with this app, obviously, it's all kept in one easy, accessible place where you can easily present to anyone. So it just puts the power back in your hands and allows you to kind of be on the front foot when, kind of showing people, what you've been through regarding your medical history.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And your case was definitely an emergency situation, collapsed on the pitch. Things like that do happen all the time, but like Alistair said before, you don't see it all the time in the news. So this next clip is just going to highlight some of those issues.
Once you're out of the football domain, whether you be on holiday or anything, if something was to happen for you, God forbid, if you was to collapse and need special assistance, it would be nice for somebody to be able to access your phone, look into the app, look at your medical history, whether it be your blood type, if you've had any recent concussions or anything like that, and be able to come to a diagnosis quicker than if they were starting from scratch.
Even simple things like knowing what drug allergies that player might have, they might not have access to, which is quite scary.
So, Josh, you have been in and out of hospital multiple times across your kind of football career. Can you kind of just explain, when you went into A&E, did you know that they weren't aware of anything you'd had done, tests privately and with the sports club? You'd kind of just assume, oh yeah, they'd have been passed on that information, but you arrive, they've got nothing to hand. Like, were you aware of that beforehand?
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Like you said, I guess you just kind of rely on other people to take care of you and whatnot. But obviously, with this app, I'm able to, be in control again, and they're able to know what I've been through in the past, which can obviously help them to care for me better in the present. So, yeah, that's quite a scary thought to think that people were caring for me without, knowing what I've been through.
Yeah, and especially, I suppose, a lot of the information is lost along the way. And if you've been from clubs to club, then that information might not have been passed. So even though you're kind of going into A&E, they could, your GP or whatever could have given them some information, but a lot of information is lost from when you've been going from club to club if the doctors haven't passed that on. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, it's a scary thought. I guess, it just puts the power in your hands, like I said before, and just enables you to show anyone who asks simply and quickly, I've been through this and this, so this is the best way to care for me, or even perhaps showing them what you've done in the past. If it's a reoccurring injury or ailment, you can show what you've done in the past, and they can obviously care for you much quicker and more efficiently as well.
Yeah. And it doesn't just stop when, you stop playing football. It's way past that. It's, after your retirement. Your information needs to be in one place because, say, for example, if you do go into A&E again, when you're well into your retirement from football, that information still needs to be somewhere. So we're just going to show a quick video on kind of the details into what happens with that information, if that information is not there once you've retired.
I'm not registered with a GP. From being the age of 8 years old when I signed for Forest, all of my medical bits and bobs have been done. 4 years at Forest, 6 at Derby, 8 at Tottenham, 4 back at Hull, 3 at Derby, and then another season at Hull. For somebody who moves club to club, or foreign players that come over to the UK for 2, 3, 4 seasons, whatever it may be, there's no infrastructure to get all that information and keep it under one roof.
Nearly 37, been in football 20 years as a professional, I think it is now. I've had lots of injuries, lots of scans, lots of consultations, blood tests, screenings. I know that everything's fine, but I'm not aware where everything is collectively and how I could get it all.
Their healthcare record isn't passed on to the general practitioners currently, which boggles me.
For example, they have a mental health issue. So they've been struggling with anxiety and depression for the past 10 years and have been accessing a sports psychiatrist and a counsellor from sport, and then they go to see their GP.
It's just unsafe, not just for the player, but also the clinical practitioners who are put in difficult positions.
So Ronnie, obviously you kind of deal with that on a day-to-day basis. Can you just go into a little bit more detail about how that would affect your care as a GP for the players?
Yeah, so my other work is as a general practitioner, and if, as we've said, 50% of people don't know, first of all, if a player is registered with a GP, and if 50% of information is not being passed on from club to club, puts you in a really compromising situation. And I think it got perfectly kind of summed up there of it's just unsafe. It's unsafe for me as the clinician, and more importantly, it's unsafe for the player. We're talking about football, we're talking about money being spent in lots of kind of other avenues, and this is basic things which we should be doing properly, and it's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. And similarly, that's the same thing going into retirement. These guys will have 10, 15, 20 years worth of medical data which they cannot pass on to someone afterwards, and if they don't have that, they're at a massive disadvantage already because of that fragmented data.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of what would be the legal ramifications of this, Alistair, would you say?
Well, it's really interesting, this point, because there are a lot of concussion cases starting, which have been well publicised in the media, brought by ex-players, usually against governing bodies, and some big class action. So over the next few years, we're going to see what the results of that litigation, what those results will look like. I think from a medical point of view, I think it's really interesting because a lot of the conditions that these ex-players are suffering, a lot of the symptoms that are on display, I suspect in the majority of cases have only manifested themselves after their playing career has finished. So for a doctor who takes care of that ex-player or the player on retirement, they need to have a full picture of everything that's gone on throughout that player's career. So that might include on-pitch treatment, that might include weeks taken off for concussion, that might, pain injections, all this sort of stuff which would not appear on the player's NHS record. This actually gives all that sort of sport-sensitive, sport-specific info and intel, and it gives it to the doctor immediately on the player's retirement, and that makes, I would have thought, healthcare a lot more straightforward for that health provider to for that clinician to then treat if there is a condition. But so I think it would only that would only improve that situation. Yeah, absolutely. And kind of from a contract side of it, how can a football team buy a player and spend all that money on a player if they don't have a full picture of what their medical history is? And like one of the coaches said in the video, it's like buying a really bad second-hand car. You just wouldn't do it. So this next video will just go into a little bit more about the medical side of that.
If there was a system that gave, a mandatory generic medical,
having one single record for the player would make things so much easier.
The difficulty is people are making decisions on contracts who don't have the full picture, who don't understand everything.
There's been some where I've had every joint scanned, obviously back scans, knees, hips, ankles. Clubs in the lower leagues, even clubs in the higher leagues who don't necessarily have a big medical budget, it would be obviously more beneficial for them to have all of a player's heart scans, injury history, injections, any knocks available.
From kind of a player's perspective, all of this information is kept in one place. On the app, you've got features like tools, and it takes you to reputable resources rather than you just kind of Googling and, scaring yourself. And all of your information is there, such as your letters, treatments, the medication that you might be on. You can even, speak to your doctors through the app, hear what they've had to say. How much better do you feel having that information all in one place and moving forwards in your football career with it?
Yeah, honestly, just you feel safe and secure. Again, like it says on the screen, like it just puts the power in your hands and helps you to know that you're not just scrambling. So, like for me personally, obviously, moving forward, clubs might always have a question mark regarding what happened in the past. But with this app, I'm able to easily present to them, what happened and the excellent care that I had and the full recovery that I made also. So, honestly, this app is a real lifeline for me to really show that, I'm ready to keep playing and enjoying my career. So, I'm really grateful.
Yeah, thank you. We're just going to show you one last final video about the tools and resources and just showcasing the app itself, and then I'll just move on to Ronnie with any final thoughts.
I think it's got a really simple user interface. I think it can be used by anybody.
The app splits everything into body parts, so it's very clear for the player to know where they can find things, whether that's medical letters, medical screening, blood test results, and so on.
Certain sports don't have the luxury of having regular doctors all the time. So to have the ability to pass on good quality notes straight away, whether that be by dictation or a form, and pass it on to the main team. And you can also cover yourself and be clear about what you've done, whether that's suturing, concussion checks, dislocations, things like that.
So for example, that A&E consultant who sees the player who's got a broken leg can input directly onto the app, and that can be available on the dashboard for me straight away, and that's something that's unique.
If it goes through a third party in the player, the explanation might not necessarily be correct when it gets back, or with how busy the doctors and independent physios are, you might be waiting sort of 10 to 14 days for any response to.
It's got lots of functions that make inputting things easier, voice notes, photos of letters, PDFs, etc.
It's good information to have, and I think the future generations of players probably will take more of an interest in their own bodies.
Players, like everybody else, will just Google everything, and they might find 100 different opinions which tell them 100 different things to do, and they get worried. more so than just being worried, they might start doing things that are not appropriate. One of the things that the app does to mitigate this is it has resource section that you can tailor.
Like recovery, aid and nutrition, the mental health section, which is massive, and it's a massive part of the game and what players need, especially going through injuries. So I trust everything within this product that can benefit me moving forward in the future. AB3 empowers the athlete,
merges the record,
and revolutionises care in sports.
So Ronnie, it'd just be great to hear some final closing thoughts from you.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. And from my side, we want to look after players appropriately and safely. And by having all the information in one place, that makes our job easier. But more importantly, the players' health improves and it benefits all stakeholders. All stakeholders win with it being in one place.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And thank you all for coming here today. Thank you to the panellists. We are actually doing another session tomorrow. We will be focusing more on the kind of medical legal side of things. So if you would like to come along to that would be lovely. But thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely evening tonight.